Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of my RollerCoaster Tycoon Deluxe series. Today we'll be going through Leafy Lake. This level, I've always felt should come after Forest Frontiers as opposed to after Dynamite Dunes. I do find it to be easier than Dynamite Dunes in terms of the scenario objectives. However, it really does come with a downgrade in terms of the available scenery, though. What you get in comparison to Dynamite Dunes really leans you to this sort of leafy lake forest, Forest Frontiers version 2, if you will. It's even sort of in the name Leafy Lake. But I decided, nope. You know what, we're not doing a giant forest with big roller coasters going into the trees off into the distance around the lake. Instead, what I'm going to develop this time around is a lakeside town. And coming into this scenario, I sort of had this idea that there would have been an old town and a new town. And the new town was developed to create like a theme park from the old town because, I don't know, money or something. You know how it is. And so coming into this scenario, that's what I've decided to run with. Instead of trees and a lot of stuff like that, I decided to go with a more developed look. This, of course, means that I'm going to have to use buildings, which I don't particularly like buildings, especially in RCT1, mostly because they occlude the view. You can build buildings and make sort of like this maze through buildings, and that's great. It looks good in your head, but when you look at the screen, it just sort of looks like buildings. So the challenge here was to create a setting that did not look the same all over the park. So I used a variety of things. I also wanted to introduce colors, and while I did say that I would respect the terrain, as in the land of scenarios, I never did say that I would respect the water. And while Leafy Lake is very nice, I felt that there's just a bit too much lake. So I end up making an island later to sort of help with transit and other things and to fill in the area. As you can see, the time-lapse has now started. In the early game, I mostly wanted to focus just on completing the scenario. And the reason that the land looks all crazy like that is because I wanted to lay the foundation of what would be required for what I wanted to build in the future. However, given the limits on money and I wanted to get income rolling and stuff, I just created the bare minimum that would allow me to build the infrastructure. So basically, whenever I wanted to have paths that went underground, or anything that would be a pain to alter in the future. I also wanted to have a water transport ride, but you don't get water transport rides in this scenario, so I decided to use the boat hire instead, and this becomes useful in multiple ways later on. I've now moved on to building a roller coaster, and this is sort of the last ride I build until I complete the scenario, as it allows me to get enough money. Well, oh no, there's one more ride that I build, which is another roller coaster, which is a shuttle loop, but it's actually just temporary and I don't keep it, and I delete it after I have enough money to build what I actually want there. This roller coaster was fun to build. I wanted something that would be pretty high up off the ground. That would be pretty long in length with lots of sweeping turns, and later on it would sort of dip into the houses and things. And so the layout that I wanted for Leafy Lake was going to be divided into several different sections. Sections that I, of course, create because there are no themes. So what I wanted in the end was sort of like a residential section, and I wanted Old Town, and I wanted like industrial section, and then I wanted the main town with a nice big plaza. And yeah, it's a lot. So to start with, what I thought would be a good idea would be to build the sort of suburb residential area in the thin land areas surrounding the entrance. So pretty much everything that I've built so far is just considered part of the suburbs area and is not actually a different part of the park yet. I wanted a sort of elevated food court at the front of the park, as you don't get a whole lot of space there, and I did not want it to be off to either side. I also needed a sort of like a dock building, so I decided to combine the two, which created sort of a interesting path network inside the building. This is a strategy I used throughout this scenario, hiding complicated, ugly path networks within buildings. I'm now building the bumper boat, which went through several iterations trying to get a nice border around it. And in the end, in the long term, I end up using the other boat hire to create the border, but that doesn't happen for some time yet. I just couldn't seem to get the boats to bumper, and what fun is bumper boats without bumpering? They would just sort of go out one piece of the sort of track there, and as you can see, they would just sort of go right into the other piece. So I tried to make it further apart, and that didn't work either. So I decided to use another separate ride track to make the border. Though, as I said, I do change that later on, as I wasn't happy with that, and I really don't like to use pieces of rides and things like that to create scenery, with a few exceptions, which we'll get to a little bit later. But things like using paths as canopies and stuff like that, I don't like to do that type of thing. I prefer to utilize the scenery that is there in the way that it's intended to be used, and to sort of creatively solve other issues sort of within the bounds of the rules of the game. Not that there's anything wrong with doing that type of thing or whatever, it's just not for me, and I much prefer when I have the capabilities of, say, RCT2 or something, where you can make a proper canopy. I don't like just faking it, I guess, is what I'm getting at. I would rather, go without if I can't have the real thing. Now that I had gone far enough across the park, I decided it was time to put my boat hire faux transport ride into action here. And as you can see, it allowed me to nicely border off the bumper boats, which was really nice. It made for a nice effect. A big challenge I had later on was creating unique buildings. Like I said, I don't like to overbuild, so I tend to stay away from buildings. But in this scenario, I really felt that the buildings I built were necessary, and to sort of, keep me within the lines of what would be acceptable, I sort of decided that every different building needed like its own sort of story or its own reason for being there. There shouldn't just be a building sitting in the middle of nowhere for no reason. So I try to get everything to blend into the area that I build it. Unfortunately, while I was building these nice archways, the scenario ended, which was unfortunate, but I really wanted to get to the decorating here. And these archways are an example of when I will use ride pieces or other pieces as scenery. And the reason is because these arches are intended to be an arch built out of roller coaster pieces. Like if I wanted to build it and I had the scenery available, I would still do it this way because that is literally the exact effect that I want. I wanted two arches that were built out of roller coaster pieces. And I thought it ended up looking really nice. So in this one case, I don't feel that the breach of the, no rides as scenery rule was really breached because, as I said, it's sort of, if I'm not going to, why not use roller coaster tracks to make a roller coaster track arch, which is exactly what it's supposed to be. I don't think scenery could do a better job than actual roller coaster pieces. Now that the scenario's over, of course, I start to spend a bit more on the scenery and more superficial things. I really wanted to get the entrance down to set the tone for the surrounding area as I was starting to hit the limits, and I didn't really want to build too far out without having an idea of where I was going with it, and I can only really keep so much in my head at one time. So each one of those little buildings and stuff like that I've kind of started at this point, I actually had a plan for in my head. I just had to execute that plan. I wanted to make the sort of shores of the lake a little swampy, so I didn't want to make anything in this level too dirty, although Old Town ends up looking pretty dirty. But the rest of it I keep nice and clean and colorful. I really wanted to do something colorful, as the first two scenarios were not colorful at all, but that was intentional. Like I said, with Forest Frontiers, I really just wanted to do kind of a foresty fort and get it out of the way, especially since forests come up in the original RollerCoaster Tycoon scenarios so much, and the scenery in the original scenario listing is so limited. You really only get 4 packs, and we've used I guess 3 of them. So the only one that is remaining is Candyland, which isn't really a theme that you can use independently. It's not going to create its own stuff. You're going to have to probably do something like I'm doing with Leafy Lake here, and buildings and your own scenery and things to really get it to have some sort of effect, instead of looking like it's just candy laying on the ground. With the residential section, I really wanted there to be a variety of houses, and I really wanted the idea of yards and things like that, and the rides would be in the yards or on the porches or next to the lake. I wanted a very scenic look to it. Figuring out the order to build things in was a challenge. I actually started this park several times before I got a year one that I was happy with. Mostly, it came down to I would make mistakes changing the land. Like, I knew what I wanted the entrance to look like, but given how expensive land manipulation and loans are in this one, though the loan amount is high, which is great, which is why I was able to go as ambitious as I did. But when it comes down to the land side of things, it's really expensive to buy land and to manipulate land in this one. So it was a matter of figuring out the order that I could do things without running myself into the ground, while still maintaining like a functional park, and while also being able to maintain sort of my future plan as I went along. It came out pretty close to what I intended. I did intend there to be a stop of the boat hire on the island that I create, but in the end there just wasn't enough space. Coming into it, I don't know if it was nostalgia or something, but I remember the lake being bigger, I swear to God, but no, I'm probably just older. So, I came in with this idea that there would be about, I don't know, maybe 20% more lake than there actually was, so I had to tone down my plan once I actually looked at the map again. So no stop on the island, but that's okay. I didn't really need it because there wasn't enough distance that really required it anyway. So I think in the end, nothing was really lost not being able to implement some of the ideas that I had coming into it, because really when it came down to it, they were just sort of redundant and not required. I also don't use any pre-made coasters or any pre-made designs in this scenario either, once again because the terrain and the ideas that I was going for just didn't account for it. I end up hiding most of my cues in this scenario within the buildings that I build, although I try to have little areas where they poke out, or later on when I build the dock for the residential area here, I have like a little area that pokes out that kind of acts like a boardwalk along the side of it. So I try to keep it interesting that way. There's a few cues that are entirely contained within the building, but I try to always at least give one sort of like indoor-outdoor interactive element with each one. One of the design strategies that I use that perhaps might not be apparent looking at my builds is I always place benches outside the exit of a ride behind the no entrance sign, and the reason is so that there's always a bench available for anyone that needs to sit, and this really helps keep the paths of your park clean. This is one way that I keep my park rating up and not have to deal with too much problems while I build. So you'll notice that pretty much every ride has benches sitting behind the no entrance sign. And that's almost all I put behind there, is basically a couple lamps and benches. Now that I had my island, it was time to populate it with some stuff. I really wanted to have a bridge leading across from the entrance. In fact, you could pretty much say this entire build, theme-wise and in terms of design, all started with that bridge. That bridge was what I wanted to build in the first place. In fact, after Dynamite Dunes, I was going to take a break from making videos for a little bit while I sort of like got some new ideas, because I had done a lot in that one that I felt it was pretty good. And I wasn't really certain what to do with Leafy Lake. Again, it's sort of like you come into it and it's like, oh, Leafy Lake, yay, Leafy Lake Forest. That's what it's going to be. And I can't tell you how many Leafy Lake forests I've built in my lifetime. But I've never built something like this before. So this was really interesting to go for this time around. The island was going to become like the center feature of the front of the park. The park is really ends up being divided into like two main sections, and of course that's just due to the terrain because of the way Leafy Lake works. You have like sort of the frontal lake section, and then you have the back flatland section. And the flatland section is basically taken up entirely by the New Town, what I ended up calling it, New Town and Old Town. I don't do much in terms of transport rides on this map, though. I do have a chairlift later and a monorail that goes around New Town. The chairlift ferries people between Old Town and New Town. The second major idea I had coming into this scenario was I really wanted to build the river rapids on the island that I was going to build the bridge to. So it was sort of like the progression went, I want a bridge. I want a bridge with a nice entrance. I want a bridge with a nice entrance and a dock. And then it was like, and then I want sort of this like more unkept island where a lot of the water rides would interact, and the river rapids would be the primary ride. Although it doesn't actually start on the island, it does start over in the residential area by the dock. This was one of the cooler queue lines. This is the one I was mentioning earlier with the sort of like boardwalk. Also has a nice sort of, walkway up above too. I was pretty happy with that. And then the exit is fairly direct still. It's a little long, but, what can you do? The vision for the island and what I wanted that to look like was really starting to come together. I thought that it would be sort of like some sort of industrial mill or, something along those lines would look great there. And so that was what I started to build. Finally, I get rid of that shuttle loop, and I build what I actually wanted to put here now that I had unlocked it, which is a mine train coaster. And this would also have some interaction with the island and also the other side of the lake. The main challenge I had building this coaster was I wanted it to be cool, but the main problem with this coaster is the supports occlude everything. So I wanted there to be coaster there, but I didn't want the supports to get in the way of everything and block all my work, because it wouldn't look very good if it's just like, oh yeah, there's totally like stuff in between all that coaster, but you can't see it because the coaster's in the way. So that was my main challenge when I was thinking up the design, and that's why I didn't go very elaborate with it, though I do a lot more over here when it's kind of in behind the building and tucked away, and I have a little bit more freedom to play. It does go through several revisions. Pretty much everything in this park goes through several revisions, as they were fairly ambitious ideas, and pulling it off the first time was rare. The maze and the mine coaster were basically going to sort of act as the set pieces that would provide a transition into Old Town from New Town, although I don't declare Old Town and New Town to be their own areas. It's all just the town, so I don't put any signs or specific barriers to be like, oh, you're crossing into Old Town now. It's just sort of like the scenery just sort of changes, and before you knew it, you're somewhere else. I wanted to put the pathing all the way through the island, all the way to the back. And this is sort of why, in the end, I didn't put a transport ride, as you can see on that side with the bridge and the river ride and stuff. That would have been where the station would have effectively been, but there just wasn't the room. I wasn't happy with the first design of that coaster's occlusion of the food court, so I decided to give it sort of a wide inclined sweeping loop that crossed onto the shore of the other side, and that gave me the angles I was looking for. It ended up looking quite nice. I decided to finally start filling in some of the buildings in Old Town. Another feature that I really wanted was to have the haunted house on the island. And it's actually the only ride in the park that gets the tent entrance design. And I made it all black to sort of go with the big mill thing there and make it all spooky and stuff. And as well as the supports of the mine train. Switching everything from pave per ride to entrance. I really spent a lot of time getting the look right on the island. I really wanted a certain look, and I don't have the words for it, but I pull it off, so that's what I wanted. I mean, not yet, but when it's done. But there it is, you know. So if you want to know what I was going for, that's it. The color scheme for the colorful sections I ended up going with were red, white, and blue. And the reason red, white, and blue is because I'm Canadian and our flag only has red and white. And I needed a third color, so Americans win by default. I didn't have any water features in the Old Town area, and I hadn't really planned on putting any additional ones, aside from when I get to the more industrial area. So I just put a nice fountain there, because the idea behind this is, you know, Old Town used to be the town before Newtown was the town, so obviously there would have been nice stuff there, it's a lot smaller scale. I keep the forested areas pretty small overall, and they're mostly on the outer edges of the park. With the mine ride station being one example of this. The reason I'm doing like a lot more in this one in comparison to, say, Forest Frontiers, where I could have done big station buildings, is just due to the size. This map has like twice the size of Dynamite Dunes, so this would definitely be a much more established theme park than Forest Frontiers or even Dynamite Dunes. Forest Frontiers, in comparison, would be like, maybe a small town theme park or I don't know if anyone's ever been to Callaway Park in Calgary. That's kind of the look I was going for. It's themed and it's nice, but it's not like there's like set pieces or anything like that. You know, it's just nice foliage and good layout. I had now started on the industrial section, which wasn't going to be very big, but I did want a couple of buildings, and the rides that were going to be within the industrial section were going to be the log flume and the water slide. I kind of wanted the ending aesthetic to be like the mine train is carrying, I don't know, maybe coal or wood or something from its station into the island with the mill, and the mill was going to get fed water from the, the river rapid. The river rapid delivers the water to whatever this building is. Let's say it's some sort of a lumber yard or something. I don't know. Maybe it's a power plant. I don't know. RollerCoaster Tycoon logic here. I just wanted some sort of interconnectivity in the logistics of how this town would potentially be laid out so that everything kind of makes sense about why things are there, like I was saying. So this was, like I said, maybe this is the lumber yard, we'll say. It cuts the wood with the power of water fed to it from the river rapids. So I wanted this log flume to be kind of elaborate, but not too elaborate. I didn't want it to detract from the river rapids. I definitely wanted the river rapids to take center stage in this scenario. I did, however, want a longer runoff from the log flume than the sort of curved pattern I had at the beginning there. And I have a nice little sort of crawl out, which runs nicely beside the path there for a little bit to give it some effect. As it was industrial, I felt the sort of more forested surroundings was fine. I then decided to build the pirate ship just on the little river there. I don't do much else with it. I didn't think there was a need. Next, I just built this little cabin here, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with it yet. I just felt like I needed more buildings over here to give Old Town some balance. I was thinking most likely the chairlift, which is what ended up happening. Decided to build a little swan ride over here, as I still had lots of boat hire types that I hadn't used yet. I didn't make the track very big as swans are slow, and I already had lots of rides, and I was going to have a lot more rides, so it really was just a matter of balancing out the area. With the lake mostly completed, aside from the water slide, I was preparing now for the main part of Newtown. That building that I just built there under the supports is a strategy that I'll use sometimes to make supports like that less obnoxious. Just to sort of break up the height and things like that so that you have some other texture in there. So you don't just sort of have like this gridded, fence of supports. Now I decided to build the water slide, and you could definitely say that this is the power plant. I even modeled a building after a power plant. This water slide caused me a number of issues, being able to get the velocity to even go up the small incline that I had at the end there. I thought that for sure that drop would have been enough, but the runoff was just slightly too long. So I had to do several modifications, slight modifications. I keep the overall design, but some people died on that one. Yeah. Now I could finally start on Newtown, and I start with building the main monorail station. I mean, this area of land at the back is basically the size of Forest Frontiers itself, so I figured that it could be serviced by its own monorail. Fixing the slide. I think that's when someone died. I'm not sure, but that might have been it. I wanted the main Newtown area to be laid out like basically you'd go through the monorail station into this sort of giant plaza that would allow you to sort of split off into different directions, and those directions would each have their own ride and it would mainly be big coasters. All the big coasters would be here. I also use a roller coaster piece as a set piece for the second time in Newtown. Although this time it's not just a set piece, but it's also part of an actual roller coaster. But I thought the combination of the two looked pretty cool when you had the ones at the front entrance and then the one at Newtown at the back, although we're not going to see it for a bit still. I'm now building the plaza. I wanted the plaza to be surrounded in water with a canoe ride that went around it, as I still had more boat hire car types to use. The canoe is the last one I end up building, though. I don't use any more boat hires. I did have plans for water tricycles, but again, that one got cut just due to the lake not being large enough. I didn't want it to be too busy. In fact, I wanted a little bit more lake than what ended up happening there. It's almost a little too busy for my taste, but yeah, compromises. Got the canoe ride in now. The canoe ride was more of an aesthetic choice. It wasn't like, oh, this is going to be an amazing ride or whatever, but it does end up being pretty cool. Just having the canoes kind of going around there. Now I figured I would complete the chairlift, as I had enough of Newtown complete that I could build the chairlift station, which was going to dual as a roller coaster station as well. Extend the monorail. And then I stopped halfway because I got this crazy idea that I was going to build a dueling words just aren't working for me today. Dueling coaster, single rail coaster. I've never really liked building these. However, I hadn't built one yet in any playthrough, so I figured, hey, why not? I have a lot of space that I can use, and this actually ended up proving more of a challenge to get working exactly like I wanted. I am pretty happy with the building, though. The building itself that I put them on, I think ended up looking pretty nice, although we don't see the final thing for a little while yet. I make several modifications to the building along with the coaster. In fact, I completely changed the coaster from being two dueling coasters to being a single Mobius dueling coaster, which ends up working way better just in terms of how the logic and the track layout worked. I just couldn't get the dueling aspect of the two dueling coasters working within the space that I had. Of course, I did have a station that was starting really high on the ground, and I didn't want to have a second chain link, as second chain links tend to lead to disaster, as if stuff breaks down, you'll likely have a crash. So you want to make sure that there's any coaster is always clear of the chain link before another one can come in and connect with it, which without block sections is really hard to manage in RCT1. So I try to stay away from multi-chained coasters in RCT1. But because the majority of this track was downhill, and then I had to make my way all the way back up to this station, this proved an extreme challenge to get something that could both withstand momentum and be interesting and keep the dueling aspect of it. I didn't want one to get too far ahead of the other. I wanted it to be a kind of an actual race, although in the end, the red one always wins. I kept playing with it and playing with it. I even got fed up with it and went to bed one night and came back. I'm like, nope. Do it again. Do it again. Do it again. Yeah, not a fan of this coaster type. But I was happy with the end result, though, when I finally got something that was doing what I wanted it to do. It was pretty cool, and it definitely complements the end result. I didn't give up on it. I almost gave up on it. I almost deleted it and replaced it with the steel coaster. However, I end up building the steel coaster somewhere else. Still not happy with it. A big problem was that the blue one would lose too much speed during the turns when I was trying to cross the track back over. And I didn't want to have the blue track doing a tight turn at the bottom of the hill. But because this particular coaster only gets like a single turn type, you don't get anything banked, you don't get anything. You can't even do slope downward turns or anything like that. Finally, I got fed up and I just deleted the blue one. And we rebuild it into a Mobius here. The Mobius works way better because due to the sort of alignment of where the tracks were, it was easier to come in and connect to the second station than it was to connect to the original station. Once I had this set up, I was able to give both tracks very similar layouts, with the only exception being that I wanted one to be kind of low and fast, and I wanted the other one to be high and a little bit slower. But in the end, the fast one slows down at the end, and the slow one speeds up at the end, and they cross the finish line roughly at around the same time, but not quite. I then use the alternative color scheme aspect of RollerCoaster Tycoon to paint the other half of the track blue to give it the same effect that I had with the two roller coasters, even though it was now one. decided I would finish the decorations on the plaza. And finish off other areas before biting off new things. I was particularly happy with the queue layout of the dueling single rail coaster there. Given that there's, 4 separate branching paths, fitting it all nicely within that building was a challenge. Now I decided to do what I was originally planning to do before I got distracted building that dueling coaster and build the chairlift. Coming in here at the right angle, without polluting the plaza in ugly chairlift supports, was a matter of some indecision. There was really no good way to go about it, and I did end up having to delete a couple pieces of scenery on the left side of the canoe queue, just to make it so that the supports weren't floating in midair. I figured I should probably expand my monorail before I build any further in this area, or I might accidentally block myself off. Now it was time for the steel roller coaster, and what I wanted to be sort of the feature set of Newtown, which was going to be a vertical loop on top of the monorail station. And this is the second set piece I was talking about to complement the sort of roller coaster track arches at the entrance. Although, of course, this vertical loop actually works. Well, eventually it works after I get the rest of the roller coaster and the velocity and everything set up right. I had to play with this one quite a bit too to get the stats exactly where I wanted them, and to get the look of it exactly how I wanted. I wanted it to be pretty cool, pretty long, but I also didn't want it to be too overbearing, as I had just created this nice town and plaza, and I didn't want there to be like a whole bunch of spaghetti roller coaster tracks everywhere. But I did want it to feature in that town plaza. It was definitely a centerpiece. So the end solution was, once I sort of mapped out how I wanted all the different velocity and stuff getting back to the town, was I do a nice big sweep around the plaza, which looks really nice in the end. It kind of reminds me of the amusement park we have here in Edmonton, where it's called Galaxyland, and this one of the roller coasters there does like this sort of big sweep around. Gives you a nice view of everything, and that was kind of what I had in mind when I was building this. Finding the right combination of drop and up to the loop while also giving enough velocity to complete the circuit was not super easy, and I actually almost scrapped this design, but I was persistent and kept at it as I really felt that I could make this work. Here I'm building the big sweep around the plaza. Another strategy that I utilize when building roller coasters, sometimes at the entrance and sometimes at the exit of the roller coaster. I'm not talking about the actual entrance and exit, but I'm talking about the from the track point of view, like entering into and exiting from the roller coaster track. I will often put like sort of like a helix spiral. And you can think of these as sort of like capacitors or resistors or something like that, along the lines of I use them to change the amount of velocity that a roller coaster has. So I guess the best way you could think of it is like when I'm designing a roller coaster, imagine you have like a piece of floss or something, and you wrap that floss around both fingers, and then you have like the piece of floss in the center between your fingers. And the roller coaster track that I'm building is the piece of floss between your fingers, and then wrapped around each finger, you can sort of make it tighter or looser or do whatever you need to do to adjust the floss to do what you need it to do. And that's the way that I treat helixes. So by having a helix at either the entrance or the exit or both, you can sort of have a managed way that you can sort of overpower or underpower your roller coaster during design, and then sort of taper it off once you have the design. So let's say, for instance, if you overpower it and you have way too much velocity coming into the station at the end, just stack a couple more helixes and that should take care of that. Or let's say you have too much velocity coming out of the station off your first drop or something like that. Stack a couple helixes. You'll see that effect used through in my Dynamite Dunes playthrough with the Egyptian Sun roller coaster, the gold one, where I had that one helix at the exit of the roller coaster and a 3 helix stack at the entrance of the roller coaster, and by sort of like changing those stacks and stuff, I was able to adjust the roller coaster velocity to get through the track how I wanted. I'm utilizing the same strategy here. Not quite to the same extent, because with the Egyptian Sun one, I needed a little bit more slack. With this one, I knew I was going to have a lot of velocity coming off the drop, so I only put the exit helix. Finally, I felt ready that I should fill in the back. The back was going to contain a couple rides. an observation tower, and then later the wooden roller coaster. A wooden roller coaster I end up naming Wet Woody, of course. I was really running out of building ideas at this point. I had built a lot of buildings. So for the observation tower, I decided to make it a multi-building, and I also built this sort of transition building there. I had lowered the land, initially intending it to be temporary for building purposes. But I liked the look of it so much, just having the ledge there, that I decided to keep it, and I just painted it white. But I still needed a way for people to get down to the lower level. And while I could have just built like a ramp down or something, I thought it would be a little bit more interesting if I had some sort of transition building that would hide the spaghetti path. So inside that building contains like a single path, front to back. There's no intersections inside that building. It's basically a straight path. It's just a straight path that's condensed in a very little area and then hidden with the building. I decided to make the back building giant and I mean, like, not super giant. It's not that much bigger than the front monorail station, actually. But it was actually going to contain both the wooden roller coaster and the monorail station. You'll see me utilizing this strategy a lot in this scenario, as you've probably noticed that I'm used buildings for multiple stations. I think I've done it 3 times now. We have the entrance building, which has, I guess the entrance building doesn't have multiple stations, so it is multi-purpose because it has a food court on it. And then, there's the steel roller coaster building with the chairlift, and then this one at the back with the wooden roller coaster. But again, I don't want to overdo it. I don't want every station to be dual purpose. It just really seemed to make sense here. And what this sort of ends up being is like a giant house, like a mansion. I don't know, maybe the guy that owns the park lives upstairs or something. I didn't want the wooden roller coaster to occlude the scene, as usual. So I kind of just stuffed it into the corner there. But I did want it to have a nice water splash. So what I ended up doing, which kind of ends up looking, I think, pretty cool, is I duck it down and it goes into the building, around, and then out the other side. And I put a water feature in front of the building and it splashes into that right beside the path, which I think is really neat. The only issue I really had building this coaster was the ending. The water splash would sometimes have enough momentum to get back up to the station, sometimes not. So I tried several different, variations on the return track there. Removing 5 men here, adding little things that would have slight changes to velocity, just to see if I could get something that was reliable. And in the end, I did find a combination that worked well. Nobody died on this coaster. I decided not to spend a whole lot of time on the features of the back building. I didn't want it to be like a centerpiece or anything like that, aside from the fact that, you know, it's in the center and it's in the back, but it's also at the back of the park. And like I said, like it's you know, maybe the owner lives there or something, so it's part of the park, but it's not the part of the park. It was more about the plaza when it came to Newtown. So I wanted this area to be a little bit more sparse, and have less stuff but bigger stuff. I reserve the jumping fountains for the food court plazas and the bridges. I figured that I should put a few rides that don't have buildings, although I do make nice paths and give them nice surroundings and things, but just to sort of break up the buildings. I do it again here. I didn't want to put any buildings at this junction so that there would be a clear separation between, you know, Old Town, the suburban area, and Newtown, without any particular area sort of overpowering the other. So what I did to sort of compensate so that, you know, I don't build one area over the other is just to build some regular flat rides I had been holding on to. I was pretty much satisfied with the ride count and layout at this point, and so now it was just about scenery. I decided to throw a few more buildings in by the bumper cars to kind of fill that area out. I didn't have any other ideas for it. It was really what it came down to. And I thought that the monorail could use a little bit more underground interactions or tunnels. It just seemed like that area ended up being kind of like a big backyard to that yellow house. So unless I was going to put something interesting in there, I felt that I couldn't just fill it with trees. It's just too big of an area to just fill with trees. I thought that blue on the wooden roller coaster really fit the area well. Kind of like neon water or something. For this area, I decided to use the very thin trees, as I wanted almost you to be able to not be able to see the trees, so that the course of the single rail coaster was very clear. Finally, I paint the wooden roller coaster building. Like I said, I keep it plain but interesting, I think, with some central like statue feature. I used tall trees in the wooden coaster so that you could actually see something. I just felt that there had to be something in there. So once I placed the trees, I sort of just like spam the mouse button, fill as much as possible, and then anywhere where I see where there's like too much support being removed by tree, and it looks like, you know, the tree is a support, then I just remove those trees. So I sort of just clean it up afterwards until you get a nice arrangement of support and tree. So we've now reached the end of the video. I hope you've enjoyed this build, and here is the end result.